Hello, YouTube. In the year 1906, the scientific journal of the Russian Physico-Chemical Society received an extensive article by a little-known provincial professor, Myshkin, under the discreet title Movement of the Body in a Stream of Radiant Energy. The editorial board of the magazine immediately had complaints about the author. To occupy almost 40 pages of the magazine with boring details of unintelligible experiments was a clear disrespect to other authors. The very fact of mechanical pressure of light was already discovered by the famous experiments of physicist Stoletov. And yet, after a long debate, Myshkin's article was published in full, as if someone wanted distant descendants to know about this. Despite the fact that the title of the article did not promise anything unusual, the facts cited in the publication were so surprising and incredible, and the author's conclusions were so bold and extraordinary that the Russian academic world accused the scientists of some kind of unintentional falsification. In response to this accusation, 3 years later, another article by Myshkin appeared in the same magazine, and in 1911, its continuation, rejecting attacks on the incorrectness of experiments. Scientists were shocked, first of all, by the main conclusion of the author of the bold experiments. Yet, and yes, it still sounds somewhat unexpected today. A space in which there is some kind of distribution of radiant energy must be considered as a field of some ponderomotor forces. What does it mean? What did the now forgotten Russian professor mean? And what kind of experiments gave him the opportunity to talk about such a strange behavior of space? Professor Myshkin's experimental setup was ridiculously simple. A light mica disc was suspended on a thin platinum thread. A light mirror was attached to the same thread, on which a ray of light fell, then deflected onto a screen showing the angle of rotation of the disc. The device was placed in a glass cylinder, which for opacity, in order to exclude light pressure, was closed with a cardboard case covered with black paper. Myshkin suggested that light is not just a stream of radiant energy, as it was then customary to say, not only a carrier of light pressure. Light is a medium that affects space and changes its energy characteristics. The professor conducted his experiments at night, thus he excluded exposure to sunlight. The device was installed on a table, the room was darkened, and our burner, a gas lamp, was lit 3 meters from the device. A ray of light was directed at the mirror from the flame of the burner through the lens. Reflected from the mirror, it fell on the screen. So what? 10 minutes after the start of the experiment, the pointer disc turned, was set to a new position, from which it no longer left until the burner kept burning. The professor knew that voices would be heard. The disc rotates under the influence of convected heat flows arising under the glass hood from the heat of the burner. To exclude any possibility of such interpretations, the experience was complicated. Along with measuring the angle of rotation of the disk, the air temperature in the laboratory was also measured. It turned out that the burner increases it near the device and not under the glass cover by only 0.007 degrees. A simple calculation convinced the scientist that no convection currents could affect the disk, and therefore Myshkin expressed the belief that he was dealing with some new forces. In order to avoid external influences, including pure light pressure, the device was placed in a glass cylinder closed with a cardboard case covered with black paper. I think it's important to repeat it. In further experiments, screens made of different metals and wood were also used. And this very mica disc began to behave in a strange way. Without any visible effect, it turned rather haphazardly at different angles during the day. However, Mishkin managed to trace some correlations. The displacement of the mirror was influenced by the location of the sun and moon, as well as the state of the weather. Professor Mishkin managed to firmly establish that his indicator was influenced by forces that were not gravitational, electromagnetic, or magnetic. The conclusion he made was quite bold. The surrounding space itself affects the sensitive indicator. The professor called this unknown forces ponderometer, from the Latin words pondeos, weight, motor, movement. Ponderomotor. In the 1970s, engineer Belyaev from Ulyanovsk city in the USSR significantly increased the sensitivity of the Mishkin indicator by hanging it on a thread from a special web and placing the entire device in a vacuum. In this case, the indicator began to react to very strange influences: the approach of a person, a bouquet of freshly picked flowers, a freshly plucked apple, and it hardly reacted to the dried bouquet and rotten apple placed at the same distance. Belyaev injected a little ammonia vapor into the vacuum of the cylinder, and his indicator began to react to the vessel with ammonia located outside the basement. It would seem that the unusual effects revealed in Professor Mishkin's experiments should have aroused the active interest of physicists. But the opposite happened. His experiments were dubbed monkey business, the Russian equivalent of the English equivalent of the Russian term mashina возня. And they declared them incorrect, and the phenomenon itself convective interference and random zero drift. Mishkin, this bold Russian scientist, received most ire from Stoletov, who studied the pressure of light rays on a similar installation and spent a lot of time to get rid of all the imaginable interference. The verdict of a venerable colleague with a worldwide reputation turned out to be decisive. Mishkin's experiments were recognized as unintentional falsification. Science at its best. You can see so many examples in the 20th century and even the 21st century, but let's not go there today. So to summarize, 1906, Russian physicist and inventor Mishkin discovered an unknown energy during experiments, which he called ponderomotor forces, from the Latin pondus, weight, and motus, movement. The field of action of these subtle forces is the space in which there is any distribution of radiant energy. With the help of the device he invented, Mishkin proved that light is not just a stream of radiant energy and a carrier of light pressure, but a medium that affects space and changes its energy characteristics. It was also proved that light can accumulate by material bodies. Half a century later, a gravimeter developed at the Kazan University, unexpectedly for its creators, like the Mishkin device, registered movement of unknown subtle forces. The Delta device, created by engineer Belyaev in 1972, also recorded them. However, to this day, the study of these undoubtedly real subtle energies is considered to be pseudoscientific. Well, in 1997, Valentin Psalomchikov, the Russian scientist and author, whom I like to mention as much as possible in my videos, and a member of the editorial board of the NLO magazine, Gennady Chernenko, tried to figure out the essence of Professor Mishkin's discoveries. Chernenko found one of Mishkin's articles in old magazines, and in the appendix to it, a meter-long strip of paper with the results of scrupulous 2-year daily observations. To process them, they handed over a photocopy of the strip with the results. To process them, they handed over a photocopy of the strip to the Doctor of Physical and Mathematical Sciences, Professor Stepanuk. His students converted all the data into numbers and entered them into a computer. The electronic box, so to say, produced a sensational result. Resonant peaks appeared on the printout, corresponding to the solar and lunar phases, as well as periods determined by the position of large planets in the solar system. Thus, they unwittingly revealed quite material effects of essentially astrological interactions in our solar system. When Psalomshikov and Chernenko decided to prepare a corresponding publication, they found that the Novosibirsk researchers were also interested in the Mishkin effect. I have no more information about this discovery, but I'm sure someone somewhere is continuing the research. That's what I wanted to let you know today, and I'll bring you more interesting stories of Russian, Eurasian scientists involved in very unusual research. Even though it may be hushed down, whatever they discovered is still out there, and somebody will pay attention. So that's what I wanted to let you know today. If you like my research, please support me through the links you will find in the description to this video. Please like my videos, please subscribe to my channel, and thank you for your support.